So you're all very welcome to the version 8 Terminal 4 webinar. And just to give you an idea of what we're going to be covering today, it's approximately a 2-hour webinar. We're going to spend the first 100 minutes doing a demonstration of the new version 8 system. The system that I have is currently a sandbox version of Terminal 4, but I'll be using this to go through all the demonstrations of everything that's new within the system. After the demonstration, we'll take approximately 20 minutes to take any questions, and hopefully we'll be able to answer your questions today. Any questions that we're unable to answer today, we will find out the answers for you and we'll post them up on our community extranet as well. We're going to be doing a number of webinars, so all the questions that we get over the various webinars, we will be collecting them all together, so you'll get to see all the questions and the answers to them as well on the community extranet. Please do email your questions in throughout the session. The email address is training@terminal4.com, and also at the bottom of the screen there I've got the email address for your questions. And also for any of you that are using Twitter, if you'd like to post comments to @Terminal4, and if you could use the hashtag V8, that'd be great. That'll really help us then just find your comments and so on. But please use the email address for your questions and the Twitter account for any comments that you have on the system. Let us know what you think of it throughout the demonstration. Okay, so let's have a look at today's agenda. I'd like to start off first of all just giving you an overview of the interface itself, and we'll go in and just have a look at changes that have been made to the UI, to the UX. We've put a lot of time and research into our actual UI and UX, so I'll just run through a quick overview of our interface, and then we'll go into actual specific areas where there have been major improvements. So we'll look at the user management, the site structure, and then we'll look at our assets. And by assets, I mean our content types, our page layouts, and also our navigations. Then once we have an understanding of the new assets, we can go in then and start adding content. Lots of changes made to the add-in of content. We'll go in and have a look at the new direct edit. We'll have a look at the new media library as well. Then we'll move on to some new features, packages in version 8, and then we'll also look at the new system administration menu. So we'll show you where everything has been ordered in terms of configurations. Really, it's just much easier to find a lot of what were handlers in version 7, much easier to find now in this new system administration menu. Then we'll look at the new publish interface and the transfer options available to you as well. And then we'll look at some further new features called measure and engage, and we'll talk about what will be available in those two areas of version 8. Then we'll talk about the training materials that we're going to make available to you for free, so that you can get going in updating your own training materials, get them ready for the new version 8 system. I'll point you in the direction of our community extranet so you can get timings of our general availability of version 8. And then Michael Morley, our web developer, is going to join us for the questions and answer session. Michael is monitoring the email address training@terminal4.com throughout today's session, so if you'd like to get your email sent in there, he'll be able to then answer your questions at the end of the demonstration today. Okay, so that's our agenda. Let's go in and have a look at the interface itself. So we're going to start off with the new login screen, and then we'll have a look at the tooltips and responsiveness and so on and so forth. So rather than just reading through this list, why don't I just go in and show you exactly what this new interface looks like. Okay, and here it is. This is the version 8 login screen, and if I just put in my username and password, we can then go in and log in to the system. Now, I am using a sandbox version of version 8, so I do have this loading screen. It does take a little while when I'm navigating through some of my pages. I've been told it's because the cache has been switched off, so it does take a little while for my pages to load up, but this is just for my sandbox version, and this is what I'm using for my demonstrations today. Okay, here we have our site structure screen. Now, I've configured my installation that upon login, I come straight to this site structure screen. It is configurable. You can, if you prefer, put people onto a welcome page when they log in, and that welcome page, you can control the HTML that appears on that page. You could already do that in version 7, but we've made it much easier to find actually where you go in and configure the details upon login. I've set mine to the site structure screen. If you have set yours to the welcome screen, you can get to your welcome screen by clicking on the Terminal4 logo, and you can get to the site structure screen by clicking on this site structure icon here. In my installation, I've set it up that it automatically comes to the site structure screen whether I click on Terminal4 logo or the site structure icon that's over here. The next icon, just to point out, is this icon here, which represents bookmarks. And it is possible to bookmark any section of your website that is in Terminal4, and also any page of the site of Terminal4 version 8 also. So you could bookmark the page layouts or the content types that you're working on at the moment, and they get added to this bookmark list that you see here. And we'll bookmark some pages as we go along through today's demo, so you get an idea as to how this works. Bookmarks are unique to each individual user, so depending on what bookmarks you put in, they are unique to you. Nobody else will see what pages you've bookmarked. The next icon to point out is this image of a globe, and if we click on here, this opens up your site language. And for those of you that are publishing out your websites to multiple languages, this is how you would switch between each language. And to give you an example, I have English, Spanish, and Arabic in my sample data, and I could switch between each of my website language versions by clicking on any of these options here. Next icon is this icon here, which will open up our community extranet, so a quick link out to our online documentation, our community forum, and all our training material and news and all the good stuff that's in the community extranet. If you click on the icon, it will open up a new tab, and from there you can access the community extranet. And I'll just take a moment to get me authenticated and logged in to the community extranet, and there we are. From here you have access to our news, documentation, support, and also the community forum as well. We've posted a lot of information in here about the timings of the GA, or the general availability of version 8, and I'll be pointing you to those pages later on today. Okay, back to the interface. We next have our person that's logged in. So I'm logged in as myself. There's an image there. That's not actually me. That's a configurable icon, so I could replace that with an image of me or an avatar if I wished. This is just the default icon that I've got in my sandbox installation, but just to repeat, that is not actually me. And in the profile settings, you can actually go in and replace that image with an image of your preference. From here, I can access my profile and I can edit the details, and I can also log out by clicking on my username and selecting log out. Next then, if we come over to the left-hand side, this is where we now have our menu. The menu itself has an ability to be shown or hidden by clicking on these arrows over here, so you can really maximize the space on your screen for the interface page that you're currently on. Let's just have a brief overview of what's in these, and then I'll be going into much more detail throughout today's demonstration. We've changed where things are actually located, and we've added in some new menus in here compared to version 7. And we have published a document on our community extranet which maps out everything that's in version 7. It's mapped out to tell you where it is in version 8 as well. So please do go on to the community extranet and familiarize yourself with that. In the content, this is where we have everything relating to content, not just creating and editing and deleting, but you'll notice that from here we also have the recycle content options, content migration, some integration tools, and synchronizing external content. So a lot more things have been put in with the content menu, and it's just to make these things easier to find because they are related to content, so it made sense to put them in here. Now I'm getting to see all of the menu options because I am logged in as an administrator. If I were logged in as a contributor, for example, I would have only the relevant options in this menu here. I wouldn't see, for example, the recycle of content and the synchronizing of external content if I were a contributor. In sites and channels, as you would probably expect, this is where you're going to find things like publishing your channels, the feature to transfer to your live server, for example, for your live website. You can manage your access control from here, and you can push out content to your social media, and there's also mobile integration features added in here as well. More about these later on. Assets, this is where you'll find content types, your lists, your page layouts. Metadata mappings have now been added to the assets list, and we also have navigations. And another thing that we've added in are the reports that are relevant to your assets have now been added to the assets menu. We felt that made a lot more sense to just put everything related to assets under the assets menu heading. More about these reports later on. And then we're going to come to this measure area, and also there's an engage area, and I've set aside some time today just to go into detail to tell you exactly what you can expect to find in the new measure and engage areas of our menu. And then finally we have our system administration in here, and in our system administration I'll be going into that in much more detail in a moment, but I'll show you where all what were handlers in version 7 have now been listed logically under our system administration menu. Before we go in there, I'm just going to go through the rest of the interface. So here we have our site structure. I'm just going to minimize this menu so we can focus in on our site structure screen, and if we just move over to the right hand side, we have a search option. So a powerful search option. You can search for your content, and you can search for your section names within your site's structure. And down here we have our bookmark icon. So for example, if I wanted to create a bookmark for my site structure page, it's just a matter of clicking on the bookmark icon, and then it gets shaded, and if we have a look at the bookmark list, you can see that site structure is now one of the bookmarks that I've added to my list. To remove a bookmark, you go to the page of the bookmark and you unclick the bookmark, and you'll see then that it's removed from my bookmark list. But let's just leave that in, and we'll add another bookmark as we go through today's demonstration. Next then, let's look at the site structure itself. We have the usual folder structure that you're familiar with in version 7, but we have changed the icons of our folders, and I have a screenshot here just to talk through all these new site structure icons. So we're sticking with that house icon for your root section, the level 1 of your channel or your microsite if you have any. And then wherever you see a folder which has this gray shaded color, that's what we would consider a normal section. A normal section being a section which publishes out and appears in any navigations that it's instructed to appear in. If you have selected a section to be hidden from navigation, this is what the folder will look like. It's an unshaded version of that folder, and that's for a hidden section. If you've made a section pending, so that it's pending to be held back from publication, it has this orange or yellow or amber color of the folder. If a section has been marked as inactive to be deleted, it will become a red colored folder in here. And if you have a section which is a link section linking to one of your internal sections within Terminal 4, it'll get this icon here, and that's to signify links in a chain. And if you have a link section linking to an external website, so a web page outside of the Terminal 4 CMS, it'll have this icon here, a folder with an arrow pointing out, just letting you know that this is an external link section. Now, any mirrored sections that you may have will have this icon here, and depending on whether it's the master branch or if it's the recipient branch, it'll have an arrow pointing out or an arrow pointing in, respectively. If you do have any archived sections, remember an archive section is a section where the content is not updated automatically on publish. It will receive this icon here, and that icon is to represent a filing cabinet, somewhere where you would archive things. And then a new icon is this icon here, which will help you to easily identify any sections that have been marked as e-form sections, and they get this radio button icon in there, and that's just to represent that it's an e-form section. In other words, the section that receives data from any e-forms or XML forms that you may be using. So that's just a brief overview of our site structure icons. Let's go back to our interface here, and just to bring your attention to these columns that I have here. The first column with a globe, and this will represent the search engine optimization results of any SEO reports that have been ran. And I have some examples. If I expand my sample data, and let's have a look at this branch here, you can see that my SEO results have not scored very well. They've scored quite low. They've been highlighted in red, and we get the score result in here as a percentage, telling me how poorly, in this case, I've scored in terms of my SEO. The next column represents your user accessibility, and I scored a bit better, I think, for my user accessibility, but still some improvements to be made to some areas of my website there. Now, in later versions of version 8, you will be able to reconfigure the user accessibility in much greater detail than you can currently do so in version 7 and in version 8.0. That is going to be something on our roadmap for future development. We feel that could be quite a powerful tool, and maybe it's not as useful as it could be at the moment. We are going to be developing the user accessibility so that you get as relevant as possible results for all of your websites. Now, we can hide these columns if we wish by using the toggle SEO score button and the toggle accessibility score as well. Let's do that so that we can focus our attention on these three columns that we have here now, the green, the orange, and the red. And this represents content in each of my sections, and importantly, the status of the content. So for example, in my home page, I have the number 2 in this green column, and that represents the number of approved content items in that particular section. I have one piece of content in the yellow column or the orange column, which represents pending content, and there's one piece of pending content in that section. And the last column, as you'd imagine, is for inactive content, and how much content do I have in there that is currently inactive. So you get a quick overview of the status of all of your content throughout your entire site structure, and you can decide whether to show or hide those options by using the toggle buttons above the actual menus. You can maximize or make it full screen if you wish by clicking on the full screen option. And next thing to point out is this actions area that we have here. So one important thing that we've done is we've replaced the yellow section drop-down menu with a blue actions button. And a great improvement that we've done on here, I feel, is that you no longer hover over the button to get a pop-up menu. It's now a click to show and then click to unshow that menu. So the problem that we had in version 7, where you had to stick within the menu, if you came outside the menu it would disappear, that has now gone much more accessible in terms of usability. Let's just take a little look at what's in this menu. So remember, I am logged in as an administrator, so my first bunch of options relate to the sections themselves. So create new sections, edit, preview the section, move the section to elsewhere, duplicate it, mirror it, or delete it. And these are all available because I am an administrator. The next section of options are with regards to the content in the section. So create new content, edit content, or delete content. Below that, we then have another area of options, and these relate to the publication of either the individual section or the entire branch, if you wish. And then finally, we have the direct edit interface, and we have the option to bookmark that particular section. So let's bookmark that section, and we'll see then that gets added to our list up here in our bookmarks. Let's just minimize that area, and let's have a quick look at another improvement that we've made to the interface itself, which is to make it fully responsive. So I've just brought out this menu here on the left-hand side. So I'm using quite a large screen today for the demonstrations, but if I were using a tablet, for example, you'll notice that the screen, the interface itself, will respond to the size of my screen. So here I have enough space for my menu to be displayed. If my screen were smaller, we would then hide the menu inside this icon here, which looks rather like a hamburger. If we click on that, we then get to show the menu and hide the menu, and we can begin to shrink the interface all the way down to a mobile phone size interface as well. So you can go in and manage your Terminal 4 installation on your mobile devices, tablets, and your laptops, PCs, and so on and so forth. And if I just maximize that, and let's bring up all of our options here for our site structure. Okay, let's have a quick look at my list that I wanted to go through. So we've looked at the new login screen. We'll talk about the tooltips and inline documentation in a moment. We've seen the responsiveness of the new interface, and we've looked at the new site structure screen interface. We've seen how to get to Direct Edit, but more about Direct Edit a little bit later on. We've looked at accessibility and SEO columns and how you can toggle to show or hide those options, and the new blue Actions button that replaces the yellow section drop-down menu that you're used to at the moment in version 7. We've had a brief look at the menu structure, but we will go into that in more detail, and we've looked at the new bookmarks feature. And we've also looked at those site structure icons. Next on the list is our user management. So let's go in and take a look at our system administration menu, and we'll look at how we set up users and how we manage the groups in there as well. And then once we have some users and groups, I'll show you how you can assign edit rights to your websites. Okay, so the system administration menu, this is where we've housed a lot of the system configurations, but let's look first of all at the user rights and roles. And if I just expand this, let's go in first of all to our user management. So in the user management, this is where I can quickly search for all the users that I have in my management system. Let's just minimize this screen so we can focus our attention on the user management. So in here, you can list all users within your system if you wish, and you can now show, you can decide how many records to show at any time. If I just go back to the search option, you can search the entire list of users, and if I just type in my name here, I'll be able to click on search, and here we have then all the results of anybody that has a Vincent either in their username or their name. It tells me the user type, and then from the actions menu I can edit my user or I can delete that user if I wanted to. Now the search results can be filtered down, so let's take a look and see, is there a Vincent who is a contributor? And you can even filter your search results by group as well. So it will make finding users and using the filtering much easier than it is currently in version 7. And if I do search, I don't have a user called Vincent who is a contributor and also belongs to the example site. So my search results should come back with no results at all, and that's working quite well there. So if I go back to my search, from here we have these green buttons. In this case we have a green Create New User button, and this is consistent throughout the version 8 interface. Wherever you're in an area of Terminal 4 where you can create something, whether it's content or if it's a new user or if it's a new navigation, look for the green Create button. It's always towards the top right hand side of your page, and if I click on Create New User, we can go in and take a look at some new features here in the interface. So here for our user management, the first thing you'll notice is that we've moved the enabled option over here to the top right hand side. So very, very easy to enable and disable a user within your system. And in here we can put in the credentials of this user. So the first name, it has a red asterisk, so that's highlighting that it is a required field. But let's see what happens if I don't put any data into this required field. If I move away to another field, we'll see, actually it's not working in this one, so I'll log that as a bug, apologies for that, but what we will see in examples in other screens is that we use an on-blur tool which will highlight in text over here towards the right-hand side of exactly why we need to fill in that data. So it's going to be much harder to miss these required fields, and you will get extra information as to what you need to be putting in those. You'll also notice that the list of fields to create a user has become a lot smaller, and that's because we've hidden any of the lesser used fields such as community access and authentication methods. We put them in a show hide menu down here. The reason for this is to reduce the size of the create user interface to just the bare minimum that you would need to create your user, and the rest then, the optional extras, are then hidden in a show and hide menu underneath. The default language options allows you to decide which language a person will view when they log in of your website, and you can also configure the user interface as well, so you can pick which language you want to use as your Terminal 4 interface. Let's take a little look at our authentication methods. So the authentication methods that we have, we brought in new authentication methods in version 8, and you may notice that Kerberos is one of the ones that has been added in version 8. I'm using a local authentication method, but we do have LDAP, Kerberos, SAML, CAS, and also you can set up your remote users as well. So that's our current authentication methods in version 8. I just cancel out of here and expand our menu. Let's take a look at our group management. And in the group management, this is where you can assign individual users to groups. But before we do that, let's take a look at the list of groups that I have. I currently have 24 groups in my installation. And what I'd like to do, let me just minimize this menu first of all. What I'd like to do is find my particular group. I've created a group for my T4 university. So if I start typing into this filter option here, you'll notice that it immediately filters down the results of all of your entries in this table, not just the ones that are displayed. And this filter option is very, very useful if you have a lot of groups or a lot of assets, for example. You'll find the filter tool the quickest way to locate your particular result in the table. In this case, I'm interested in the T4 University, and in the table we now display the ID number of, in this case, the group. So this group ID is number 30 in here, and we can instantly see the number of members in that group, and the actions menu is where we can assign our access rights, and we can also edit the group in here as well. Let's go in and create a new group. So that green button towards the top right hand side is where you'll find the create options. In this case, create a new group. So let's click in here and let's see the options. So one thing that I want to point out is the new inline documentation that we've added. We've added in these tooltips. So we'll see more of these tooltips highlighted throughout the other areas of version 8. But what we've aimed to do is to give some useful tooltips in here so that you're no longer dependent on moving out to our community extranet documentation. We will be updating these tooltips over time to make them as descriptive as possible. Another thing that we have is if you move away from a required field without putting any data in there, this is the on blur that I was talking about that didn't work for me in the previous screen. You can see here that moving away, the field itself becomes highlighted as red, and you get this on blur description which says, in this case, name cannot be blank. So it really draws my attention to any required fields. So let's put something in here. Let's call this Vincent group. And next thing is the email address is now optional. You can, it is recommended that you put an email address to a group, but it's an optional option. You can decide on which channel this group and members of it will default to when they preview, and if there is a group inheritance. So you can select here any group inheritances that you may require. But let's have a look at my group here, my Vincent group. And down here is a list of all available users. I can expand the list if I want to show all of the records, and I can also filter over here as well. So let's imagine that I have a person in my installation called Joe, and I want to add Joe to my group. Well, I can use the filter tool to quickly jump to the Joe user. Joe is a moderator, and I would like to add Joe to my group. And that's it. And I can just run through the rest of the list to add one or two others. So let's add in Anthony Director is a visitor in my installation. Let's add Anthony, and also let's add in John Flood is an administrator. I'd like to add John into here as well. And just below this, we get to see then another table, this time showing me all of the group members in this table. We can use the filter option to filter by user type if we wish, and there's a further filter for typing in, let's say we just want to see, is John a member of this group? And there we have a list of John in that particular group. And if we want to remove, very, very easily done, we can remove our members by just clicking on this remove option that we have here. Okay, so that's the managing of our groups and so on. I won't save that group, I'll just click cancel to come out of there. And just to show you in the menu where your authentication services resides, if we click into authentication services, this is where you can go in and look at whichever of your authentication services you're using, and you can configure them from the System Administration Authentication Services menu. And if I just minimize that screen, you can see the options available to you, which ones are enabled and disabled, and you can configure from this screen here. Okay, let's take a look at my agenda. So we've done our groups, edit rights. Let's take a look at how do we assign edit rights then to a user or perhaps a group of users. Now I've created a bit of site structure down here, the T4 University. So let's imagine there is such a university for Terminal 4 University. I would like to, using the Actions menu, edit the main section of that channel. And if we go in and have a look at the section details, from here we have a number of tabs, and the one that I'm interested in at the moment is this More tab. So we've decided to only show the main areas that you would be interested in. Normally any of the lesser used options are now grouped under this More tab, such as metadata, ordering of subsections, edit rights, and access. And it's edit rights that I'd like to demonstrate at the moment. So if I click in here, and let's minimize that menu so we can get a full screen effect. And in here I can then decide who has edit rights to this section or this channel. And you can search by groups or by user types, and you also have that filter option. So if I wanted Joe to have edit rights to this group, it's just a matter of searching for that user and clicking add, or perhaps add in an entire group if you wish. And down below that table you'll get a list of all the current users and groups which have been assigned edit rights to that particular section. So very, very quick and easy way now to go in and assign your edit rights. So let's cancel out of here. And one final thing just to mention is the role customization options. So the idea of contributors, moderators, power users, and administrators, we're going to make that much more flexible in the future. So in future versions of version 8, role customization will be available to you. It won't be available immediately in 8.0, but it will be available in later releases. And you'll be able to check on the community extranet for details of our roadmap, so you'll know exactly when these features such as role customization can be expected to be available to you. Okay, let's take a look at our next area, so the assets I would like to demonstrate to you. So we'll have a look at the new interface in assets, and this is where a lot of improvements, very practical improvements, particularly if you are an administrator. I expect you'll find the improvements made to page layouts, where we now have a layout history available to you is quite exciting to the web developers here in Terminal 4, and hopefully you will find it to be very useful also. We'll look at the new T4 tag generator, and then we'll look at other improvements made to content types, navigations, and so on. So let's go into our assets area, and let's look first of all at page layouts, because there's been some huge improvements made to the page layouts asset in particular. So in a moment I'm going to get a list of all my page layouts, and here's a table. I actually have 42 page layouts in my sandbox installation. Let's just minimize that menu to get full effect over here, and from here you can display up to 100 records at a time, but even better, if you know the name of the page layout you're looking for, you can start filtering. Now I do have a page layout called T4U something, so it's given me a list of 3 page layouts, and this is the one I want to look at in particular, the T4U web page. Here's my description for the page layout, and you'll see again that useful quick reference to the ID number of my page layout, what group it belongs to, and from actions I can quickly share this page layout with other groups. I can duplicate it and I can edit it as well. We're going to look at this particular group, but before I do, remember that green create button. So if I wanted to create a new layout, that's what I would click on. But let's take a look at this existing page layout that I have. Well, here we have our tooltips being displayed again, so giving me some useful information in terms of, in this case, the file extension, what that's used for, and so on. So we will be able to quickly add to these tooltips as required, and we're looking to extensively review all these tooltips that we've created to make sure that they're as useful as possible. But first thing to point out, a big improvement that we've made for our assets, and this is for all of our assets, not just the page layout, is the idea of grouping your assets. In version 7, you currently have to create an asset within a group. That's no longer required. You create the asset first, and then you can decide on which group this asset should belong to. And if you change your mind as to which group it should belong to in the future, it's very, very easy to change the group that it belongs to. And in fact, you can belong to multiple groups. We have down here the option to select the primary group. So from this list, I can quickly filter to find all of my groups, and I'm looking for ones that begin with the T4 characters. If I click in here, I've now associated this page layout belongs to the T4 University group. But it doesn't end there. We can go in and also share this page layout with other groups. So if we click into the shared groups option, none selected at the moment, but let's go in and we can start typing out a group name, for example, if we wanted to, or we can scroll down the list here. So if I wanted this to also belong to the sample data group, and I can decide then what access the sample data group has to my page layout. Is it read-only access, or is it full access? Full access meaning that the sample data group can also edit my header and footer of my page layout. So very useful tools in there, and we can add in as many groups as required just by adding them to this table here as multiple rows for each group that we want to add in. If we have created the page layout, we can always remove group access, and we can change the primary group as well. So a huge improvement in terms of the grouping of our assets. It doesn't end there. There are further improvements. Let's take a look at the header code tab. So you'll notice first of all that we've automatically enabled the syntax highlighting. That's what gives me the nice code highlighting in my example header code that we see here. This page layout is quite a useful one to demonstrate, so I'm actually going to bookmark this page layout, and you can see it gets added to my page layout, is added there to my bookmarks options. Next thing to look at is the new generate T4 tag, and this is where you build your T4 tag. So let's imagine in my header I'd like to put in, and let's see, down here I have some hard-coded header links. I'd like to replace that with a navigation for a menu. So if I go to create T4 tag, we get a pop-up window, and from here I can create navigation tags, media tags, meta tags, and channel tags. So let's focus in on the navigation tag, for example. The tag builder has been simplified greatly, but none of the functionality has been lost. In fact, we've actually added to it. If we have a look here, what type of navigation object do I want to look for? Well, I can have a look at all navigation objects if I wish, or I can restrict this list based on the navigation type. So if I'm only interested in link menus, then I get a smaller list over here which shows me only link menus. And as it's quite a long list, you can scroll down there, or you can just start typing in to find or to narrow the list results. And let's go for this T4U top menu. That's one that I created earlier. And once I've selected it, you immediately get the T4 tag is previewed for you. So I can see that this ID number is 109 for that particular navigation object. And if I want to take that tag, just click on the blue copy to clipboard button. You get this green bubble just telling you that you have copied that to your clipboard, and you can now paste in that T4 tag. And let's do just that. So in here, I'd like to paste in my T4 tag for my menu, and by pasting it in there, that's it, as simple as that. So the T4 tag builder is a bit easier to use, but we'll have a look at further improvements to the tag builder when we look at our content type assets in a moment. And next then, if we have a look at the History tab, this is a completely new tab, new functionality, which we're very excited about because it will make life easier for the administrators out there. Let's take a look and see exactly what it does. Well, the History tab works quite similarly in a way to how History works for your content. You may remember in version 7 you can go in and compare two pieces of content side by side, and you can highlight, or you will have highlighted, the changes between the two versions that you're comparing. Exactly the same here for your page layouts. So here you can see that there are quite a few versions of my page layout. I'm currently on version 19. The green dot that you see here indicates that that is the current version in use. I can see when modifications were made to this version and who made those changes as well. So you can see different users have been working on this page layout over time. And if we have a look at all of the page layouts available, we can see that edits go all the way back to its incarnation, which was in January 8th. And if I click on this tick or check option here and then pick the top one as well, you'll see that I can now compare those two selected page layouts. Let's go in and have a look and see what this actually does for us. Well, you get two options. You can compare the code, and this will give me a side-by-side view of the page layout between those two versions. And if I want to, I can go in and look at the visual ones. And in fact, I think I'm going to change, because I know version 2, or version 1 rather, will be much more relevant for me if I pick that as my comparison. So let's go in and compare those two, because that's going to highlight some really big changes in the system. The visual option will give me the option to look at the actual visual page layout. So side by side you can get a preview of both page layouts in your browser. But I'm more interested in the actual code. I want to see what code has changed over time. And if I click compare, we get here the side-by-side comparison of the two versions. So I'm comparing version 19 against version number 3 of my page layout. And you can jump to different versions if you wish to very easily by selecting them from the list here. So we can quickly see where changes have been made because they're highlighted in yellow. And you can see quite a few changes have occurred. Let's have a look at line number 7. We can compare the difference between the two, the main difference being that in version 19 we have this T4 title tag, and in version 3 the title was hard-coded as just saying name of page. So we can quickly see where changes have occurred. If I scroll down, here is a good example of where multiple lines have changed to maybe lesser number of lines. So in here, this hard-coded link menu has been replaced with 1 or 2 lines of code. In this case, just this T4 tag is now replacing all of this hard-coded placeholder for my link menu. And we can quickly see then what ID number it is for that navigation that has replaced this particular link menu. So a wonderful feature to quickly highlight where changes have occurred in your page layouts. Now this feature will also be added to your content types content layout, so you will be able to access the history of your content layouts for your content types as well, and that's earmarked for a later release, so check the extranet to see when that will be. I believe it's in 8.1 that we will have that ready for you, but we got the page layouts one up and running first of all because that was the one that had the most demand, but coming soon we do have also the content layouts. But there are changes in content types, even though there are more changes to come. Let's take a look at those changes. So I'm now going into the assets content types, and let's have a look to see the new interface here. Okay, so again, that what may be now familiar to you, the green create button, if you want to create a new content type. Let me minimize this menu and we can go in and have a look at all of these options over here. So I have 87 content types in here, but let's go in and create one and get an idea as to how the new interface works for us. Well, again, we have these tooltips available to give us some information as to what needs to be put into each of these fields, and we also have the on blur tool that if you forget to put in a required field, then you will get some information telling you that you cannot leave that field blank. So let's call this one, this can be my Vincent test example. And from here you can then assign the group. So you do not have to select the group before you create the asset. You can do that afterwards, and that can be changed at any time as well. So wonderful improvements to that list. But let me add this to the T4 group. So there's a T4 University group. I'll add it as the primary group. In the elements, this is the new element screen. So once you've decided what elements your content type is going to have, it's much easier now to go in and add them. It's a cleaner interface. So to get started, I'm just going to click here and enter an element name. So let's have a content type that outputs content which has a heading and then also space for the actual main body of content. So in here, let's call this the heading element. This is where you put the descriptions of your elements. So maybe enter your content heading here. You can then click over to the actual type of element, and I'll go for plain text, and we have the full list available to you. So let's go to plain text. Is it required or not? What size do you want this to be? Let's make it maybe 150 characters. Might be a bit more generous for our heading. And then you just click to add that element, and it's been added down here beneath the default element, which is there always, which is the name. You can change the description of that name element, and you can change the size as well, which is wonderful improvement. Let's go in and add one more element. Let's call this for my main body. So this is an area where you can enter the main content here. Let's make this an HTML element. Then we can take a look at the HTML editor in a moment. And for the size, let's make this quite large. Let's make it 1,000,000 characters, for example, and we'll add that in. So here we have just a very basic content type with name, heading, and main body, and it's very, very easy now to go in and change the ordering of your elements. You can move them around as required. Now you can currently do that in version 7, but it wasn't very obvious that you could do it in the interface in version 7. It's now much easier to spot and to actually action moving around those elements. And if we save those changes, and I'm going to go back in to find that particular element. Let's go in and have a look at Vincent's test example with my typo as well, so let's change that. What I'd like to do now is go in and have a look at the content layout tab, and let's see what improvements have been made here. Well, let's create a new layout using that green create button, and we'll give it a name. I'm going to go with the text/HTML that I have associated in my channel. So if I go for that as my content layout name, text/HTML, you have the option here for your syntax highlighting. It's automatically enabled. And we have the syntax type is set to HTML, XML by default. And in here, this is where you would start typing out your content layout code. Now, my content layout code, just for demonstrations, I'm going to create 2 tags, one to output my heading and one to output the main body. And then once I have those done, we can put in then an anchor as well at the top. So if I go to the Create T4 or Generate T4 tag button, a pop-up window, and what improvements we've made to the content T4 tag is that it's much more intuitive. So let's have a look and see exactly what I mean. First of all, select your tag output. Well, I want to output metadata, first of all. And here's a list of the metadata that I can output. And it's already selected onto HTML anchor. The tag is already previewed for me, so it's just a matter of clicking copy to clipboard and paste in my tag. And there's my anchor added in. Let's go and generate another tag. This time I want to output one of my elements, and it's just a matter of selecting which element you want to output. So let's output the heading element. The output method is already assigned to a normal output for me, and you'll notice that the modifiers have already been chosen for me. I can change the modifiers if I wish, but there's no need to, because that's exactly the modifiers that I wanted to go for, to strip out HTML tags and encode special characters to the HTML equivalent. So nothing to do there other than select the content element, decide on your output method, and Terminal4 will now pick the modifiers for you. And there is my tag previewed automatically. If I copy that tag, it's then just a matter of pasting it in. And finally, let's have a look at a different element. So if I click main body, I'd like you to look at the modifiers to see how they change. Terminal4 will change the modifiers based on my content element that I'm outputting. So it knows that as the main body is an HTML element, I'm more than likely going to go for the parsing of media and navigation tags. And another thing it does is actually any modifiers that are definitely not relevant based on the element type are now shaded out. So you're not going to be able to click any completely irrelevant options. The rest, you may in some cases want to choose them. That's why they're not shaded out. But ones which you definitely wouldn't need, we have shaded them out automatically. There's my tag automatically created for me, but it goes a bit further than that now. For the output method, we've added in the new option of selective output. And in here, you can now go in and decide, do you want to be able to parse for T4 tags? And before I click on these options, just have a look down here at the preview. If you are to go for any of these options, you'll notice that the T4 tag automatically gets updated as you go in and modify it. And you can go in and decide on your selective output markups. If I were to put in maybe a dollar value, for example, the T4 tag is automatically updated for me. So you no longer have to go in and modify the tag retrospectively. And it's just a matter then of copying that tag to clipboard, and I can drop in that tag over there. So we've tried to make it as easy as possible to use the new T4 tag builder, and the T4 tag builder works with you now to help you pick the appropriate modifiers, and much easier now to decide or to add in your selective output values if you are using those. So that's my content type. We can go in and save that content type to my system, and let's have a look and see what else there is to look at. So there is plans to add in the history version option, as we've seen in page layout. That is on the roadmap for 8.1 that will be available to content types as well. And what that would allow me to do is I can go in and look at every version of my content layout, and I'll be able to go in. And you can also revert to earlier versions of your layout. So if you want to go back to and make active an earlier version of your page layout, you can do so. There is an option. It will be available in the Actions menu. There'll be an option called Make Current, and that allows you to switch then to an earlier version. Okay, let's see what else we've got to look at, which is our navigations. And in here, let's give it a moment to load up. We'll have a look in a moment at the improvements made to navigations. Well, first of all, we have the green Create button, so create a new navigation, which we will do in a moment. But just to show you again, this interface, which is consistent throughout version 8, which is this table, you can display more results if you need to. So let's see, what have I got in here in terms of my navigations? I've got 99 navigations, but a breadcrumb ain't one. So let's go in and create a new navigation in here. What we've got here is a new wizard tool, just to highlight what you need to do to build a navigation. So I'm going to go in and first of all select the breadcrumb type. So of my 99 navigations, let's add in a breadcrumb navigation, for example. And you'll notice that this list is a lot shorter than it is currently in version 7, and that's because we've consolidated the list of navigations for you. So rather than having 3 different breadcrumbs, if I recall, in version 7 we had breadcrumbs, breadcrumbs advanced, and then for good measure I think we had custom specified breadcrumbs or something like that. We now just have one breadcrumb, and when you go in there you can then select the options to determine what type of breadcrumb you want to output. We have inline documentation to give you good information as to what you would use each of these navigations for, popping up there towards the top right hand side. Let's take a look at a link menu. That's a nice one to look at as an example. Well, we've selected the type. It's now time to enter the details. You can decide whether or not you want to enable or disable, give it a name, and if you forget to, remember that on blur tool is there to help us. You can then associate it to a group. You can always change your groups later on, and if you do not pick a group, it'll automatically get added to the global group for you. Down here, the menu type, and just take a look and see how the configurable options will change based on the type of menu that I'm looking to create. So if I select a children menu, you'll notice there that the options have changed for me. So we're now making it easier to decide which options to select, rather than in version 7 where all of the options were displayed, whether they are relevant to a children menu or not. And if we go back to a branchlet level, you'll see that my options have changed appropriate to a branchlet level menu type. And lots of tooltips in here, so you get to see exactly what each of these do without having to refer to documentation or to a colleague, for example. You get some useful tooltips added in here. And that is our navigations one. If you're happy with the details, you then just click next, and that will create the navigation for you. So let's just put in Vincent menu. Oops. So that's all the required fields decided upon. If I click next, a great improvement is that we now give you the T4 tag straight away. In version 7, you currently have to then go into your page layouts or your content type to access the tag builder. Well, we've skipped past that now. We assume that if you've built a navigation, you're most likely going to want to have the T4 tag for that navigation. And here it is. It's automatically generated. So it's just a matter of copying that navigation, and then you can use it where you're looking to put it, perhaps in your content layout or maybe into your page layout, for example. So just that will save quite a few steps, and that's the improvements made to our assets areas, the page layouts, content types, and our navigations. And if we move on, see what's next. Okay, let's have a look now at the changes made to add in content. From here, we'll take a look at the main user interface for adding content, and then we'll also look at the direct edit interface as well. When we go in, we'll notice that the HTML editor has been upgraded to now be TinyMCE version 8, which you'll be glad to hear has removed a lot of those bugs associated with version 7, which was using, I believe, version 3 of TinyMCE. So all the bug fixes that come with version 4 TinyMCE are now available to us. And then we'll also look at the new media library. So let's go in and take a look at all of this. If I go into the site structure again, and we'll look at content that I've already added into the system. So from here, I've got my T4 University homepage. If I want to add content to that page, I can click on Create Content. So if I select Create Content, I'll now get a list of all the content types that have been enabled to my section, and I have enabled one already. So I have the T4 generic content available to me, and I can click on that content type, and here it is. This is the new TinyMCE version 4 editor. You can configure which options you want to show and which ones you want to hide. Some of them are specific to Terminal 4, such as this media option will open up the media library for me. Your tools is where you can use the spell check, and you can also access the source code from here, and insert in tables, formatting options, and you can really drill down to the actual formats that you want. So it's just a nice, cleaner interface in the TinyMCE editor available to us. So this is my main body element. If I don't put anything into a required element, we get the on-blur tool available here. So if I click away from the main body, you'll notice that it's now highlighted in red, and we have that on-blur description that says please provide some HTML for the heading 1 and also then for the name. So it's to try and make life as easy as possible for your contributors and your moderators. So that's how we would go in and work with the content. We can preview from here, and we have our save options. Depending on your configurations, you may have the Publish Now option. We have Save and Approve, and then we have Save as Draft, and finally Save Changes. And depending on the options that you pick here, will determine then the status of the content. Publish Now will be approved content and published out then to your staging server. If I just go back and let's take a look at some existing content that I've created so that we can have a look and see then what happens when you add media into your pieces of content. So here's a piece of content I created earlier. It's called Life at T4U Introduction Text. We get the version number, the status, the last modified details, and from here we get our actions menu to preview, mirror, duplicate, move, look at the history, and to edit. If I had multiple pieces of content, I can change the order very easily by dragging and dropping that content and saving the new ordering of that content. But as I only have one piece of content in here, I'm going to click directly into it, and we'll take a look at the editing options via the media library. Okay, so here's my piece of content, and if I wanted to add in an image, maybe I want to add in an image down here at the bottom. Let's go in and open up the media library. So here is our first view of the media library. We can expand, sorry, it is already expanded form. We can close the media library here. To add new media, we have the green button here, and we can hide categories to make the media library menu much bigger. One huge improvement that we've made is the ability to display much more records than you currently can in version 7. But even better than that, you can also filter the results as well. So you can filter the results based on the name of the piece of media, and you can display up to 100 of those filtered options. And this will filter through then your entire categories of your media library. So finding your media will be a lot easier than it currently is in version 7. Further improvements, we have a quick thumbnail preview of your image. We have the name, and we also now have the media ID number is available straight away to you from the table. The file name, what type of media is this, and the size has now been displayed for you in this list menu. In the actions area, we'll look at in a moment the option to create variants of the image. But before I do that, there is another view available, which is this thumbnail view or gallery mode. And in here, you can get to see gallery views of your options, and you still have the nice actions menu now available to you. And you can display many, many more options and use the filter tool as well, which is a fantastic enhancement. If you happen to know the ID number, you can still use the jump feature, which is in version 7, to jump straight to your particular piece of media that you want to use. But let's go in and use this image here, And there it is. That media has now been successfully put into my piece of content. And then from there you can go in and modify your media attributes by double-clicking on the image. Let's move out of this interface of adding content. I'm just going to cancel out of here. So I'm not going to save those changes. What I'd like to do now is show you the new Direct Edit interface. So we'll go in a moment to the same page, but this time let's use the Direct Edit interface. If I go back to my site structure, and from here we can access Direct Edit quite easily. Okay, so let's go to the Actions menu, and I want to use Direct Edit for my home page. And if we just bring up, so we've looked at the upgraded TinyMC version, we've looked at the media library. Let's now look at the Direct Edit. You can use the media library from Direct Edit, so we'll take a look at that option as well. So over here on the left-hand side, I have the options of my Direct Edit, and from here you'll notice that you now get the full page detail options. In version 7, some of these options were hidden. You now get all of the options. So for a moderator, Direct Edit is probably the way to go, because you can now change all of the details of your page. The general details are available here, much more than was in version 7, but not just that, you can now decide on the page layout that this section is to use, and so on and so forth. The metadata is available to you. You can associate edit rights from media library, so there is no reason anymore why a moderator cannot rely exclusively on Direct Edit as their solution. In version 7, it was not possible to assign edit rights to look at the page layout and to look at all the general details, so moderators were restricted somewhat in version 7 Direct Edit. That's now all changed, and you can even go in and decide on your access control rules. So everything that you can do from the main interface, you can now do in Direct Edit, which is wonderful. You can also go in and navigate around the site structure using the site structure pop-up. You can go in and move to different pages of your site. The media library is available quite nicely from the media library, from Direct Edit. So here we have my 2 images that I had in the media library. We can change the view if we wish, and we can filter the results. Very responsive filter tool that we have there. And if you do have any image elements in your content type, you can actually drag and drop in the media into your image elements if you have any. Next then, you can access your approval list from here. Mine isn't popping up for me, so I'm just getting a please wait. But in here, in the production release, we will get a list of all of the content that is awaiting approval. Another tool which has been added, which is a fantastic addition, is the analytics. So we'll see later on in today's webinar that you can now bring in your Google Analytics into your Terminal4 interface. And now my installation hasn't been associated to any Google Analytics, and I haven't published out my web page, so the results are empty. I don't have any unique page views or bounce rates. But what I have done is I've taken a screenshot from one of our installations that does have Google Analytics integrated already. It's very, very easy to integrate your Google Analytics, which we'll look at later on today. But what you can do is create dashboards, and you can then have data appearing in Direct Edit for your moderators and contributors, so they will now be able to see how many people have visited that page and what the bounce rate is and the average time that people are spending on their page. The benefits that this will bring, we believe, is that if somebody who looks after a web page has access to the actual analytics for that web page, this might help them take greater ownership of the content of that page, and also this might help them to experiment with content. So by changing certain things on their web page, they can then go in and check to see over time what has been the results of those changes in terms of attracting visitors to the web page, or keeping people, or increasing the average time that people spend and reducing the bounce rate and so on. So all this data is now available to your contributors and moderators via direct edit. Hugely powerful tool now available to your users. So let's just remove the analytics option. To get out of direct edit, you naturally click exit, but let's focus in on direct edit itself now. So in here, I have my direct edit interface. And if I just toggle the helpers for a moment, and down here, I've spotted some gobbledygook. There's some typo in here. And in direct edit, you can now, using the inline editor, you can just immediately start editing content here. That's a wonderful improvement. So there's no longer any need to go in to the actual content type. Your contributors and moderators can now edit their content, and that's going to be much easier for them because they get to see what the page actually looks like right away, and then they can just click on to save those changes by saving the content there. If I open up the helpers again, you'll notice that there's an option to add content here and also at the bottom as well. So wherever I have permission to add new content, it's very, very easy to start creating new content. So let's add in a new piece of content in here. Just a matter of clicking on the content type. Can you notice there's a little icon available here? You can control which icon is associated to each of your content types. So maybe if I had a news icon, perhaps I'm going to put in a little icon of a newspaper maybe. If it's to add an event content type, then I could perhaps add a calendar or something like that. You can control what images appear to each of your content types, and it's there just to help your contributors and moderators spot the content type that they actually need. And if I want to insert a new piece of content, I can go in and start entering in all the details that I want in here. Forgive me for just typing in some gobbledygook in here. If I save those, it will then add, there it is. There's my content has been added down here. And if I want to move that content, it's just a matter of dragging and dropping around my page as to where I want that content to actually appear. So a really, really useful feature in here. And I can go in and make changes, add media via the direct edit interface as well. So if I want to bring in that image, I can do so over there. So a fully functioning direct edit, you have inline editing, much easier now to go in and get to grips with the editor, with all of the options that you have in the main user interface. So we think that direct edit is the way to go for your moderators now, as everything that they can do in the main interface is now available to them via the direct edit. So a really nice tool in there. Let's click exit. You'll notice that I haven't saved my changes. Let's see what happens if you try to exit without saving your changes. You get prompted at this point. So have you saved your changes? Before exiting, please save it. Otherwise, you will lose that data. But I'm happy to lose that data. I'm just going to click exit to come out of direct edit. Okay, so that is the new direct edit interface. Hopefully your moderators and contributors will enjoy working with that when you do upgrade to version 8. Next then, new features added to version 8. Packages. Whilst it's not an entirely new feature, it was in version 7.4. It was called bundles. We have actually extensively reviewed what this can actually do. We've now called it packages, and whilst it's not set up at the moment in my sandbox installation, I can give you an overview as to what it can do. So in the production release, packages will be available to you, and to give you an idea of how you might use packages. First of all, generally what packages can do for you is you can take any asset of your Terminal 4 installation and you can package it up to one file, and then you can decide where that file is to go. Do you want to, for example, take something from your development server, package it up, and drop it into your production server? What we're going to be doing with this is we're going to be constantly updating our sample data set, and we're going to make the most up-to-date version of the sample data available to download. We're going to package up the sample data into a file which you can then download from our extranet and drop in to your own installation of Terminal 4 version 8. That way you'll always have the most up-to-date sample data. We're going to use the sample data to show off all the cool features, all the great stuff that you can build in Terminal 4. Our web developers have built some really cool stuff. We're going to package it all up, and you can then import it into your installation, and then you can then work with the example content types and all the other assets that come with it. So the idea is you're going to have some out-of-the-box, so to speak, examples of some really great content. Now, the packages is very, very intuitive. An example is if you were to take one piece of content, let's say you have two servers, maybe you have a development server and a production server, and you've created a piece of content in your development server, and you'd like to bring that piece of content over to your production server. Well, that piece of content relies on a number of other assets. There are dependent assets such as the content may have a content type, which is used to output the content, and also that content type has a content layout. Now that content layout may have multiple content layouts associated to it. The piece of content itself, if you can imagine it on the web page, that piece of content may have links to other pieces of content. Well, we don't have to worry about any of the associated or dependent assets. What packages will do is it will find out all of the associated or dependent assets to the asset that you're looking to package up, and it will always package those up for you as well. You don't have to do any of the hard work around this. Terminal 4 version 8 will work out all of the dependent assets for you. They will all get packaged up, and then it's just a matter of exporting or importing them into your production server. And that's how you'll get your hands on the most up-to-date sample data. There are other ways you can use packages. My next screen here is for using packages to point it at a published website. So let's imagine that across your university or your organization, you may have some websites which are not currently within the Terminal 4 content management system, but you would like to get them into Terminal 4. What you can now do is you'll be able to use packages, and you can go to the URL of the web page that you're looking to package up, and you can then, using the CSS classes, you can map every CSS class of that web page to a corresponding content type. So you build a content type, and then you'll say that, for example, the CSS class for my heading 1 is of this website is to be mapped to the heading 1 of my content type, and then you can do that then so on and so forth for your other headings, your paragraph content, so on and so forth. Terminal 4 the packages tool will then trawl through that website. You can instruct the packages tool as to how many pages deep of that URL it is to go, and it'll go through all of the pages you've instructed it to go through, package up all of that content into one file, and then you import that into your actual installation via your content type. This is going to make the migrating of external websites far easier for you. So it's a wonderful tool in that regard. Okay, let's see what's next. So we have next our system administration menu, and let's have a look and see what is in here. Now, we have published a document on the extranet which gives you details of where everything resides in version 8. So what used to be in the tools menu of version 7, we've now documented where that lives in version 8, and a lot of it now resides within this system administration menu. We saw earlier on the user rights and roles, which is where you would go to manage your users, your groups, authentication services, and so on. But there are other things in here as well, and the idea is that it should now be much easier to find all of these tools. We no longer have handlers. You just find it from your system administration menu. Your system reports, we have created some new reports in here available to you. So for example, system performance, you'll be familiar with your error reports and your audit trail. New reports such as migration reports and license reports are in here. But as I mentioned earlier on, many of the other reports, we have put them in to the relevant area in the menu. So the reports available in version 7 for content type statistics, navigation statistics, and page layout statistics, we've now moved those to the asset menu, and that's where you would find those reports. We now call them asset usage reports, and you have the page layout usage and so on. So we've put things in a more logical order. That's our system reports. Your task scheduler, setting up your sites and channels. This is where you go in to initially create your channels, and you manage your access controls, configurations, transferring of sites, and so on is all available in that administration menu. I'm not going to go through all of the options within here, but do take a look at that document on the Community Extranet that maps out everything in version 7, where it now lives within our left-hand menu over here. Let's go into some of the system settings, for example, the general settings. So these are replacing those handlers. No longer do you have a pop-up window of a handler, you now go straight into the settings here. So you can see that I've set up my default login page to automatically bring me to the site structure of the Terminal4 interface. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, if you wanted to, you could have it set that it brings you to the welcome page, and here is where you control the HTML that appears on that welcome page. And I have seen some universities use this to great effect, that when a user logs into Terminal4, they're automatically brought to an HTML welcome page which has links out to your university's web content style guide, for example, and some training resources, so on and so forth. From here, we can look at other tools such as analytics, setting up your assets, and so on. So lots of things available here, listed more logically than perhaps they were in version 7, where it's currently hidden within handlers and so on. Okay, let's take a look at what's next on the agenda. We have publish and transfer. So let's go in and take a look at the improvements made to publish and transfer. If I go into my sites and channels, and here we have the top two options. First one is publish channels. So the interface here has changed a little bit. You can now go in and very quickly select all of the channels that you're interested in publishing. And it's just a matter of switching on Enable Publish. You do have further options. For example, what do you want to do with archive sections? We've automatically got this ticked or checked so that it will automatically push through archived sections as well, but that is configurable very, very easily over here, much easier than it is at the moment in version 7. And if you need to, you can also override publish period restrictions. So if there is any content embargoes or publish embargoes on content, you can override that here if you want to. Now, to publish these channels, I would click on the green Publish Channel button, and that would add these 3 channels to this upcoming publishers list. And we have made improvements to the queuing system of our publishing. So if I were publishing multiple channels at one time, rather than forcing through 3 channels to publish all through at the same time, we now stack them in a queue. So the overall result is you have a much more orderly publish process, and it means then that all channels get published a lot quicker than if I were to put them through all at the same time. You can go in and schedule your publishing from here, so you no longer have to go into your scheduler tool. It's all available in the Publish Channels option. It's much easier to find now. It's logically placed with the publishing of channels. Schedule Publish, this is where you go in and set up your recurring publications of your channels, for example. Let's take a look at the transfer options in here, and from here you can go in and set up the transfer. So for those of you that are publishing to a staging server and then transferring from your staging server to a live server, it's now a lot easier to set up the transferring of the channels. You can enable transfers of your channels, you can set up a schedule of your transfers, and if I click transfer channels, that will then be added to my queue over here. So much more logically placed and an easier schedule to set up for you as well. So that's some improvements made to publish and transfer. Let's take a look and see what's next on the system. We have measure and engage. Now these are new features that have been added in version 8. And for those of you that were at our conferences in October and November in Boston and Dublin, you would have watched Piero's demonstration of what is going to be in Measure and Engage. If you weren't at the conference, you can access videos of the conference from the community extranet, and I would encourage you to go in. There are some great demonstrations, particularly around the Measure and Engage, and lots more about the version 8 system. A lot more about packages, for example, is demonstrated really well at the conference in there. Now, from the Measure and Engage, just a couple of things that you can do right now in version 8 is that you can pull in your site analytics. So you'll be able to configure your Google Analytics, and then we can create then dashboards for you. And these dashboards you can make available to users and groups. So people will be able to see the results of your Google Analytics without giving your Google Analytics login details away to those users. You can just have them outputting in dashboards. So let's take a look and see what these dashboards actually look like. Now, as I mentioned, I don't have any analytics configured within my system, but what I do have is an example one. So here's another sandbox installation of version 8, and this installation has been configured to our Google Analytics, and this is the actual Google Analytics of the terminal4.com website. So from here, as an administrator, we get to see all of the dashboards that have been created. So for example, the number of visitors over time, page viewers, where they're coming from in terms of geographical regions, and much more detail in here in terms of browsers and so on. So everything that you get in your Google Analytics already, but the ability now to share this information via dashboards to all of your other users. And you can go in and configure who has access to each of these actual dashboards and make them available to your contributors and moderators as appropriate. So a wonderful tool that has been added in there. To configure the Google Analytics, it's done in your system administration. You'll go in here and configure it. It's just a matter of pulling in your client secret of Google Analytics, your passkey and so on, and then Terminal4 will do the rest to pull in your Google Analytics into these dashboards. What you need to do is then decide who gets to see these actual dashboards, which of your users should have access to them. Okay, that's our Google Analytics, which is going to be in the, let's see, where will that be? In our Measure area, the performance dashboards, and that will come under Site Analytics. Now, the Measure and Engage area, there's going to be much more further development of these two areas. Now, the Measure and Engage tools will be available if you upgrade to version 8. We've decided to have two versions of version 8. So we do have the Terminal4 version 8, which is the powerful CMS, but in addition to that, there is the option to have the full Terminal4, which we're calling Terminal4 Engage.edu, and that's where you're going to get all of these Measure and Engage tools, the full suite of options here. Wonderful news is that for all of our existing clients, you will automatically get the full version, which is the Engage.edu Terminal4. So it's no longer just a powerful CMS system. We now have these extra Measure and Engage options. And please do go in to the extranet and view the presentations by Piero at our recent conferences. He explains exactly what the vision is for this. But to give you a taste, we have in here in the Measure area, we have an example here of perhaps having an alumni dashboard. Whilst this isn't integrated yet in version 8, this is to give you an idea of where we hope to go with this particular tool. So imagine for those of you that are university clients, you may already have an existing CRM solution which helps you manage your, for example, your recruitment of your potential students and maybe your fundraising and giving of your alumni. Now, we're not looking to become a CRM product, but what we're looking to do is, just as we have done with the site analytics by pulling in data from your Google Analytics, let's pull in data from your CRM solutions as well. Maybe we could pull in dashboards to present data of your alumni and also your student recruitment dashboards. So getting your data set from your existing CRM solution and pulling it in to Terminal 4 and making those dashboards available to your relevant users. So for example, perhaps your marketing team would be interested in using Terminal 4 to review their activities of a recent marketing campaign in terms of alumni raising and giving or student recruitment. What we would like to do, like we've done with the Google Analytics, is pull in that data set and display it in easy to interpret dashboards so that your marketing team in this example can interpret your data set and have a look and see exactly how effective their campaigns have been. So for example, using A/B testing, making changes to content for campaigns, what results has that done to the analytics, and not just of your Google Analytics of page hits, but also in actual revenue in terms of student recruitment and your alumni raising and giving. So that's just an example of what we're looking to do with this measure area. In the engage area, from here, this is where you can access your email campaigns, so using the Terminal 4 mailer solution, pushing out content to your social media, and also the forms and transactions. So the roadmap for forms and transactions, we've got on our roadmap that eForms will be available from version 8.1. So it won't be in the initial release 8.0 of Terminal 4, but we will have it ready in version 8.1. You will have the eForms available to you. Personalization, if you have a look on Piero's demonstration at the conference, he talks in good detail as to what he sees personalization being used for. This could be used to engage with your visitors to the web page. If you have data about your visitors based on cookies, for example, if you know that they are interested in undergraduate courses, well, based on the cookie information, next time they visit your web page, we can then tailor our content or personalize the content based on what we already know they are interested in. If you are looking to recruit overseas students and you have information of an overseas student visiting your page, well then perhaps you would want to personalize the content that appears for them so that it's relevant or personalized to particular visitors of your web page. Please do watch the videos of the conference. There are some good examples of how you could run with the personalization options in here. Our vision for the future is, in terms of transactions, is Piero has mentioned a number of times, is that his vision is that he wants it to be as easy to book a course as it is to book a hotel room at the moment. And that's where we see this forms and transactions really helping you and your institution to succeed in terms of student recruitment and so on. Okay, so that's just a brief overview of our measure and engage. Let's see then, that brings me to the end of the demonstration today. So we just used those 100 minutes just to run through the main changes in the version 8 interface. Your questions are invited via the training@terminal4.com email. If you could please email your questions, and that will allow us then to paste them out onto our FAQ area in the Terminal 4 Community Extranet. I'm going to check in with Michael Morley now to see if any questions have come in, and he's told me actually no questions have come in today. So if you do have any questions, you can email them over to me now, and we'll be able to address them. Alternatively, just have a look on our Community Extranet. In the near future, we will be posting all of the questions that have come up in the previous webinars that we did throughout this week. We had quite a lot of attendees in the previous 3 webinars, so maybe the group is a bit smaller today and we haven't got any questions in there. Okay, so no questions to address. There is time if you want to email one in now, by all means, but just to let you know what's going to happen after this webinar. Well, all information will be posted up on the Community Extranet. There already is a lot of information on there. What we will be adding is a recording of this webinar. We'll be putting up all of the questions that we received over the course of this week's webinars. We've had 4 sessions in total now, and the answers to the questions will also be put up into our FAQ area of the community extranet. Also, there is an area in the community forum for discussing version 8, so please get active in our community forum. It's a wonderful way to interact not just with the Terminal 4 team, but also with other clients and other people that use the Terminal 4 system around the world. We'll also have, or we actually do have, some general availability information. So just to give you a brief overview of the availability, we are going to make a sandbox version of version 8 available to you very soon. I'm using the sandbox version at the moment. As you see, it is quite stable. It's just QA want to make sure that we have a completely bug-free, or perhaps as bug-free as possible, before we get it to a production release. So we will make the sandbox version available to you. Then we will provide a way to get that upgraded to a non-production version of version 8, and then we will finally release then the actual production version of version 8. We have had to push out the GA date. It was initially believed that we would be completely bug-free and ready to go on the 19th of December. Unfortunately, we didn't make that date, but we felt just for the quality of the product, a decision was made to actually hold back the GA release, and a decision will be made in February as to when the GA of the production release will be made. That will be communicated to you on the community extranet. At the moment, the most up-to-date communication is that a decision will be made in February as to when the production release will be made available to you. But please do check in on the community extranet. All the information is there. We will also be posting up the client support readiness information. So what do you need to use version 8 in terms of your database, in terms of browsers, and so on and so forth. So do check the community extranet for all of that information. Also, in terms of training, you can contact the training team via training@terminal4.com, and just to let you know what resources will be available to you for version 8. We will be publishing out and making freely available via the extranet. You will be able to download generic courses for version 8 web developer, version 8 end user, and then version 8 train the trainer. These will all be published out on the community extranet when the production release is available, possibly before then as well. And what you'll then be able to do is just take that generic training documentation, and you can then just adopt it and adapt it to your own in-house training material that you probably already do have for your version 7 for all of your contributors and moderators. If you do not have time to update your own training material, please contact me at training@terminal4.com. We can discuss updating your training material for you. We're happy to do that here in the training team. Let us know if you're interested, and I can get back to you then with a quote of the cost to do so and the time that we believe it would take to turn that around for you. But we are publishing generic training material that will be available to you on the extranet. I'm just going to check in with Michael Morley, see if there's any question. No, so there's a shake of the head there from Michael. So no questions have come in. So I think what we'll do is we'll wrap up the webinar now, but please do email any questions that you may have after this webinar. We'll be taking questions up to the end of today in training@terminal4.com. And please, if you've enjoyed the webinar, if you have any comments, let us know what you think of what you've seen so far in the webinar for version 8. Please do post your comments to our Twitter account, which is @terminal4, and if you could please use the hashtag V8. We'd love to hear what your initial reactions are to version 8. Let us know. Hopefully you like what you've seen. Let us know what you like most. The direct edit looks pretty cool. Whatever it is, we'd love to hear your comments, and if you could put it to @terminal4 and hashtag V8, it'll make it a lot easier for us to find your comments and respond to them. So that's it from me. Thank you very much for watching today's webinar. I hope you found it of use, and a recording will be made available to you. And watch watch our Community Actionette for updates of when you can get your hands on the version 8 production release. So thank you once again for attending. Have a wonderful weekend, and thank you very much. Okay, goodbye now.